Women in LNG in association with PowerPlay, presented by ExxonMobil. Hello and welcome to LNG TV and our latest episode of Women in LNG. I'm Ali Vance and alongside me is industry professional Will Dawson, and today, Will, we turn to one of the most respected lawyers we have in the natural gas and LNG sectors.
Yes, today's guest was the inaugural Vanguard Award winner at the 2019 PowerPlay Awards, which celebrate the achievements of outstanding women in the liquefied natural gas industry. She's recently become partner within BakerBotts' Global Projects Group, where she is described as, and I quote, a dynamic lawyer who draws rave reviews from clients and peers.
Well, Julie Mayo, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Houston. Firstly, how are you and how are things in Houston? Because you've had a rough time of it in recent weeks.
Well, thanks so much, Ali and Will. I'm so happy to be here with you guys today, and I'm so pleased to see the sunshine and warm temperatures return to Houston. It was definitely a difficult few days a couple of weeks ago without power and water, but our family has been quite fortunate, and so our thoughts are with those in Houston and around Texas that still are without power and electricity. But it was a very exciting time, both personally and also professionally, with what was going on in the gas markets.
Julie, welcome. And firstly, congratulations on your very recent move to BakerBotts. Rightly, the news has drawn a lot of attention within the industry. So it'd be great to hear more about your move and why you decided to make it.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to have joined BakerBotts' Global Projects team. It's a team that I have long admired, and particularly in the LNG industry, I truly believe it's a market-leading team. While based in the US, BakerBotts has offices and presences all over the world in the major sectors where LNG and other industries are very prominent. And so I'm so thrilled to be joining this team. I will say the thing that really stuck out to me about BakerBotts, particularly over the course of the last year, is how forward-thinking they've been in terms of energy transition related items. I think they've truly been market leading in thought leadership on things like hydrogen and CCUS and green LNG. All areas that really build on BakerBotts' very strong century-old practice in oil and gas. So for me, it felt like a very natural fit.
And Julie, given what's happened over the last year in the pandemic, how much do you feel that that's affected the industry? And I guess more specifically, looking forward, are there opportunities to come from it?
Absolutely. So as I'm sure everyone will recall, particularly in the early months of the pandemic last year, as we saw demand fall significantly, as we saw significant volatility in the market and pricing for oil and natural gas, I think there was a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about, does this mean that the energy transition is here? Has it occurred? In some people's minds, there was at one point talk that, well, maybe some of these oil and gas assets will never come back online. And we will, when we restart post-COVID, we will restart with renewable and alternative energies. And I think we in the industry know and understand that there are trillions of dollars invested in fossil fuel infrastructure, and that's really critical. It's a critical part of our energy mix. We need every therm. And so in order to progress the energy transition, we're going to have to really focus on two things, I think. One is, I would absolutely expect that significant portions of incremental demand will be satisfied by renewable, alternative, or novel fossil fuel technologies. But I also would expect that existing infrastructure will be modified to be more carbon neutral or to reduce the impact of those assets. So I certainly see that there's a role for renewable, alternative energies, and also fossil fuels for a very long time in the energy transition. I always like to say that it's a generational change. And so we all need to be mindful of it, but I think it will take many forms over the years.
with the kind of global consensus that accelerating the transition is indeed a priority for all, where do you see more specifically in reference to the natural gas and LNG industries, what their role will be in this?
I think the three areas that I see with the most possibility for oil and gas and LNG, I guess I should focus on natural gas and LNG, would be hydrogen, CCUS, and then maybe a more blanket term, which is this idea of green LNG. And so we've seen a lot about all three of these new technologies, or however you'd like to call it, new commercial structures in some cases, because really fundamentally, green LNG is a novel structure for the purchase and sale of LNG, because it just has an additional element to it, which is addressing the carbon emissions that are related to the production and transportation of LNG. So I think those three, and hydrogen makes a lot of sense, because in some ways the assets, the infrastructure is very similar to that required for LNG. And so I think that is a natural offshoot of what we're seeing, and particularly with all the different colors of hydrogen, there are many different ways that we can get there. And then I think CCUS is also a very important part of the strategy, because while we can reduce emissions, we will likely not be able to eliminate them without significant technological change. And so I think the ability to capture and store carbon is a critical part of an effort to reduce emissions.
And Julie, talk about that energy transition and accelerating it. Your experience is not just across large-scale LNG ventures, but also small-scale LNG and LNG to power projects. How important do you think those are in terms of the evolution or unlocking smaller markets?
I think they're absolutely critical. And I think, we really have to continue to focus on fuel switching. That switch from coal to gas, the switch from heavy fuel oil or diesel to gas, that makes a difference. Everything is incremental. And so I'm very excited about the possibilities associated with small scale LNG and LNG to power. One of the reasons I'm very passionate about LNG to power is because, given the lower capital cost associated with those projects, it really helps to bring the possibility of LNG into areas that might otherwise not have had access to it. And so I think there is a ton of possibility there. And I think that's located geographically in regions where we have historically seen less fuel switching. So I think there is more potential upside in the same areas where there's the most possibility for small scale and LNG to power projects. So I think that's an enormous opportunity.
On the theme of flexibility, I'm just interested to know how you think that may impact, either positively or negatively, the ability to then finance more supply projects moving forward.
It's a great question, and it's very topical. I think everybody's been thinking about this as we've been seeing the term of LNG transactions shorten on average. And so, as you know, many of the US LNG projects were fundamentally underpinned by long-term offtake arrangements from creditworthy parties. And that situation has changed, and I believe will continue to change as more projects look to take FID and they're looking for customers. You can't always get an A credit customer. And so perhaps the terms and conditions of those contracts have to change. We are seeing that lenders are starting to adjust to this idea. My personal view and expectation is, if it worked for independent power producers and gas-fired power, I don't see why it can't work for LNG. So I think it will take a little bit of time as the LNG market evolves to a point where really shorter term transactions may be the bulk of the transactions, and may be a basis on which you really can take FID on a new project. And as I think that happens, I think that the financing side will come along with it.
What does the concept of leadership mean to you, and what does great leadership look like?
You know, I don't believe in top-down leadership. I truly have always believed in building a team where everyone has a role to play, everyone has a voice, everyone has the opportunity to participate in making decisions. You know, it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually who just passed away recently. She was a US Supreme Court Justice, and she has a quote that essentially boils down to, you have to lead in a way that inspires other people to follow you. And I think that's a really important lesson as a leader. And so that's always been my goal. And I think so far it's worked fairly well. But that's really my view.
I think it certainly has worked very well. And what about diversity? Because for many leaders, diversity in many forms is increasingly important. How do you see the power of diversity, and why must organisations consider this as imperative, really?
I think it's absolutely critical, and I think it's fundamental to building a good team that is highly productive and highly creative. Those who know me know that one of my pet terms is this idea of multiplicity. And I can't even recall where I originally read about it, but fundamentally the idea is that it's not just about the color of your skin or your gender or your sexual orientation. The idea is that different perspectives, different backgrounds, different life experiences all bring something valuable to the table. And when you put them together, they increase creativity, they increase, in my sector, they increase the value and the benefit that you can bring to a client. If I only ever hired people that looked like Julie Mayo and went to the same schools as Julie Mayo and had the same major as Julie Mayo, I'm not going to get the same results as if I have a number of different viewpoints and perspectives. And so, frankly, I think that diversity in all of its forms is really critical. And I think that institutions have to stop thinking about diversity as something that is something they do grudgingly, something they do because they think that if they don't do it, they'll be perceived negatively in their industry or in their market. I think folks have to embrace diversity as a critical part of a business strategy. And unless and until we do that, I don't think that we will see fundamental change. It's always better to do something that you're inspired to do, or that you want to do, or that you feel is the right thing to do, as opposed to doing something because you're being told to do it, or you think there will be negative repercussions if you don't do it. And I think, the other thing that we have to focus on is we have to bring everyone into the conversation. If you look at women, for example, if we try to lead women's efforts and we only target them at women, we're excluding 50% of the population. And in that 50% of the population, there are a lot of folks that want to help. And so I think we really have to be very inclusive when we're thinking about diversity and efforts to increase diversity, because just the same way that we need every firm, and it doesn't matter how it's generated or produced, we need every person to contribute to diversity efforts.
And ultimately, it starts with the hiring process and bringing people into the organisation. You no doubt have played a huge role in hiring many people, from interns through to fellow partners. I'd be interested to get your thoughts, firstly on, what are those ingredients or what are those things that you are looking for in that hiring process? And secondly, over the course of your career, in light of your previous comments, how your view on hiring and the hiring process that you undertake has changed.
Absolutely. So in terms of what's the secret ingredient that makes the best hire, if you're looking at a new associate or a summer associate, or a partner, frankly, for me, it's always boiled down to intellectual curiosity and a willingness and a desire to learn. One of the most difficult things for a lawyer to say is, I don't know. We really think that we should always be the smartest people in the room, and that saying I don't know is some kind of a sign that we are not good lawyers. And to me, that's actually a real sign of bravery. That's a sign of understanding what you don't know and admitting that. And in being honest about that, you can serve your clients much more effectively. So, to me, one thing I always look for when I'm conducting interviews is, do you have that sense of intellectual curiosity? And one of the questions I always use to try to elicit that is to ask someone the question, if I told you you were a successful lawyer in 5 or 10 years, what would that mean to you? And I always love it when I get the answer, I'm a real specialist in my field. I really have learned and I understand what I'm doing, because fundamentally that's what we're here to do. And now I've just given away all of my interview secrets. And so I'll never be successful with that question again. But it's worth it, because I do think it's an important thing for law students and young associates to be thinking about. And then to your second question, in terms of how my thinking on diversity has evolved over time, I will admit that when I was younger, I was thinking about diversity in a more segmented way. I would think about, oh, well, we need to make sure that we have a fair, an equal number of women, or, we would be focused on certain aspects of diversity. And this idea of multiplicity really changed my thought process. And it really helped me to start thinking critically about what it means and what it looks like to build an effective team. And so really, I think that's been the biggest change in my thought process, is that instead of thinking about diversity from one perspective at a time, or from just a limited number of characteristics, I really started to think more about the whole person and what does this whole person bring to the team.
Julie, you've already said so many inspiring comments over the last 20 minutes or so. There'll be lots of people that look up to you, young males, females who want to get into law. What a bit of advice would you give them, or is there anything that you wish you'd known at the start of your career that you can perhaps tell them, and I guess people are looking to chart a similar career to you?
I think one thing I wish I'd known was that you don't have to make the right choice the first time. I have wholeheartedly adopted this philosophy of never say never, because frankly, when I went to law school, I never intended to actually practice law. I never intended to take the bar exam. And so it's been a career that has really been the antithesis of those nevers that I set out for myself. And when I was in law school, I didn't know there was such a thing as LNG. And so the other thing I think I would tell myself is, you have to be open, and you have to accept that sometimes the right thing will find you. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to want to plan everything, and particularly lawyers tend to have a desire to want to be risk averse and avoid surprises. And sometimes I think the best things that happen to us are complete surprises. And my career has given me so many opportunities and so many wonderful memories and so many friendships. And had I been closed off to that opportunity, or had I not seized it, I think my career would have looked very different. And so I think sometimes it's about being open to it. And then when you see an opportunity, when you see something that you're really excited about, you have to go for it. You have to, sometimes I tell friends and younger lawyers, you have to jump off the cliff and know that the parachute will open. It will be there. And so sometimes you just have to take that chance.
Very true words. So come on then, what did you want to do then at law school if it wasn't to go on and be a lawyer or take bar exams?
To be perfectly honest with you, my dream job was to work at a foundation working on public health policy. So I have a background in public health, international health, and infectious diseases. And so I was thinking that I might use the two degrees together and focus on public health policy. So.
And here you are in LNG, and how did that, as you say, never say never, but how did you get into this sector?
It really was, it was a natural evolution in a sense. And frankly, I know there's been a little bit of a backlash against this idea of luck. But I do think that luck plays, or chance at the very least, plays a role in all of our lives. And so I had just a very natural to me evolution from, I actually started out working on public utilities issues, so electric utility issues in Texas at what was the most exciting time until 2 weeks ago ever in the state utilities market, because we were actually deregulating the market. And so I was able to participate in some of that process as a very, very young associate. And then when I moved to Houston, I had the opportunity almost immediately to get involved with an NOC that was looking to make investments in the United States. And that's really where I learned about LNG. And it was through kind of learning with the client about the market and about how the market was developing in the United States. And, there was an opportunity for me to join that team. It was something that I didn't know anything about. I had to learn everything. And frankly, I was very fortunate because I had a mentor and I had the opportunity to be in the room. As a young lawyer, I don't think there's anything more important than the opportunity to be in the room. I absorbed so much just from the ability to sit in meetings and listen to people talk about the LNG industry. And that was so incredibly valuable to me. And I'm very grateful that a client was willing to make that investment. And so I think just taking those opportunities, but you never know where you'll end up.
Lawyers, you've spoken about those experiences. Lawyers are known for working hard and obviously often at the whim of their clients, no doubt. What sort of secrets or tips or tricks have you developed over your career to sort of manage your balance and your schedule between both life in work and outside?
I will admit I haven't always been great at that, but I try very hard. I do think, a couple of things that I do that are important. One is just a characteristic of my practice. In some ways, I've always been quite fortunate because I've represented global or international clients. So a lot of times I wake up in the morning with a million emails, but it helps me to really have some flexibility and plan my day because many of my clients are asleep by the time I wake up in the morning. And so that has been a strategy that has actually given me a fair amount of control over my schedule. So I will say, while it may not be glamorous to be on those phone calls that start at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Houston time, or starting a call at 10 p.m. Houston time, or working, with clients where their business week may start on a Sunday. And so you actually start your business week on a Saturday night, which can be difficult for your dating life when you're still a single lawyer. And so, so that can be difficult. But to me, the real flip side of that is that during the day, you do have a fair amount of flexibility if you have a truly global practice. And the other thing I will say is that when I became a mom, what I got a lot better at was prioritizing the things that meant the most to me. And I try to live by that rule, both in terms of my personal life and my professional life. I tell young associates that I fail at something every day. And that's true. I'll have days where I'm not the best mom, or I'll have days where I'm maybe not the best lawyer, or I'll have days where I'm not the best wife. And that's okay, because at the end of the road, all of that will balance out, and we don't have to be perfect every day. And frankly, failing at something, as long as you don't do it really spectacularly and you learn from it and you do better the next time, I think it's a really valuable lesson. And so I think it's important to fail. But it did take some getting used to adapt that mentality. And so that, together with giving myself the grace to do that, together with prioritizing the things that were the most important to me. I mean, frankly, that's how I keep my sanity now.
Very wise words about learning to fail. We all know that. But how much do you feel virtual working, which has taken place obviously so much in the last year, how much will that help the work-life balance? But also, do you feel that it's possible to keep virtual working, keep it going in the future?
I certainly hope that employers in all industries will appreciate the benefits of virtual working and will adopt some level of flexibility. I don't know that for all industries, it's going to be possible for all work to be remote for the rest of time. So I think we have to adapt to, in most cases, probably some type of a hybrid, where sometimes we have the flexibility to work remotely and it's more socially acceptable, because I think in many industries previously it really wasn't. And so I think that's been a benefit of this pandemic period where we've had to work remotely. Pre-pandemic, it was largely viewed as a gender-based issue, where women would ask for the flexibility to be able to work from home a few days a week, or one day a week, or certain hours. And I think that's one real benefit from a diversity perspective, is that I think that stigma and stereotype is gone now because we've all had to do it. I do think there are some benefits, because I do think, we all save a lot of time when we're not commuting, we're not going into an office, we're not doing those things. So I think there are extra hours in the day that perhaps we can devote to our mental health or to something else that we're passionate about. But I also think it has the flip side of, you have to be very intentional about turning things off. And, I think for a lot of folks, their work life has bled into their home life. And I think that's the cause of a lot of stress right now. And so, but I think it's just practice. This was new for a lot of people, and I think we all just have to get used to it and adapt. But I'm certainly hopeful that going forward, we'll all just appreciate that a little bit of flexibility might help prevent a lot of burnout issues and reduce some stress and anxiety that people were feeling with these very fast-paced lives pre-pandemic.
So you personally quite enjoy working virtually. What have you done with those extra hours or in the day? Have you taken up anything new in sort of in the pandemic time?
So the one thing that I'm quite proud of that I've done during the pandemic is I have taken my morning commute time and now I go on a walk or a jog in the neighborhood and then come home and have a nice cup of coffee. And, that has really helped me, especially during the time where we really couldn't go anywhere. That really helped me, and it helped my mental health to just be out in nature. I really believe in this idea of kind of nature bathing. I think there's something to being outside and absorbing sunlight and just what's around you. So that's one change that I've made that I would not look forward to giving up.
It's been a reflective time for many, but if you're to look forward, and there will be a time where you will be reflecting upon your career, it's my belief that we all would like to make an impact. What is the impact that you would like to have made when you reflect back on your career?
When I think about my career, some of the things that I'm the most proud of really fall into two categories. One is I am so proud when I see someone on my team succeed. And I would love to think at the end of my career to kind of look back and think that there are folks that are doing amazing things in whatever industry or area they ultimately choose. And that perhaps I had some very small part in helping them to succeed, or just even giving them any little piece of advice. That to me would be a wonderful thing to look back on at the end of a career. And the other thing that I really enjoy about what I do is I love that at the end of the day, there's a project, there's an asset, there's a facility somewhere, and that it's contributed to lower emissions and a cleaner world. I'll never forget the first flight that I took with my son. He was 9 months old or so, and it's funny to think about flying at this point. But we took off from Houston and we kind of headed east, and we flew over the Golden Triangle in Texas, and we were over one of the projects that I had worked on and devoted many years of blood, sweat, and tears to the project. And it was a very important moment for me to look at my son and then look at the project and say, Mommy helped with that. And that to me is a really wonderful thing to be able to look back on, to be able to say that you helped with something like that in some very, very, very small way. And I think that's something that I'll be very proud of at the end of my career.
That's really nice. Thank you very much, Julia. Great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with your new role at BakerBotts.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Well, lots to take in then from Julie and learn from. But that is all for this episode of Women in LNG. It's goodbye from Will and I. We look forward to joining you again, and we'll see you here again on LNG TV. Women in LNG, in association with Powerplay, presented by ExxonMobil.